Hello there, YouTube. This is Sibbles and Bits back at it again with Sit Down Saturday for Inkbound. Been a while since we did one of these, but I figured that the first one that we're going to do of this season is probably going to be about how daily scoring works, because I know that it's a little bit hidden away right now and some people might not know how it works. Some people might be interested in how to improve their score. So that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. You might be thinking, okay, Bits, it's literally been 3 days. Like, how exactly do you have an elaborate plan as far as like daily scoring and stuff like that? Well, I think that if you have a lot of hours in the game, you already have a possibly an understanding of the mechanics itself. And again, not to sort of beat it into the ground, but I am a playtester for the game, so I've been playing dailies significantly longer than anybody else. Does that mean that I have the best understanding of it? Probably not. But again, just here to sort of share what's going on through my mind, a little bit of it. Otherwise, we're going to be here way too dang long. And so we're going to be talking about each of the things that score in a daily and sort of what comes to mind and things that might affect how the bread and butter game plan might change. Because at the end of the day, as we always say here, Inkbound is complicated. It's not very easy to just say do this all the time and you're going to get a top score, because especially with the modifiers that come in dailies, those can really change up your game plan. So we're going to first start off, right here we have all the scoring rules, but we're basically going to start off with pathing, which is like this first section, and then I have clips of each additional section as we move on. So every normal combat is going to give us 2,000 points, and it's not really listed here, but you will get a extra turn penalty of 200 every turn you take after the second turn. And for those of you concerned, DOTs still count on the same turn, so long as you don't start your turn up. So if you have DOTs on the enemy and they die on turn 2, it's still technically a 0 turn penalty. Hard combats are 3,000 per, and you get negative 300 points per turn taken after turn 3. Note that there is a mod that makes it so that enemies spawn, the last wave will spawn before the second to the last wave, if that makes any sense. You still have the same amount of time. There's just more enemies on the screen, so don't worry about that. The boss fight is 600 minus 500 per turn after 5 turns. This involves Guardians and Villain. And then, of course, if you complete your run quest, you get 400. We're not really going to talk about run quests for the most part. Sometimes the run quest, since it's randomly determined, will affect your pathing a little bit. We will mention those cases. Then, of course, completing the run and just winning will give you 5,000 points. Now, as far as how your normal pathing looks, daily runs use quick dive rules. So a fight has been cut out of book 1 and book 2, and as such, an event as well. And the money pot is always guaranteed to be in the second fight of every book. So in book 1, we're going to take a normal fight. You technically have a choice between Quillings and a Vestige, but that's going to be a white Vestige unless it up tiers. Personally, I think that the correct way is always to go to Quillings. Again, certain modifiers may affect that. You may feel like you like the Vestige more than the Quillings. Since we're forced into a Carver at the end of the book, generally speaking, I think that earning at least 80 Quillings allows you to buy 2 Vestiges, so I don't agree with the fact of going for the Vestiges instead. But again, certain parameters might affect that. That also might just be your playstyle, so I haven't put it up here as like, an objective fact. You'll go straight to a drafted binding. Just a note here that if you have the gifted mod, these will immediately become ascension altars because you have 5 bindings, and technically speaking, the binding altars, drafted binding altars, are the exact same thing as the ascension binding altars. They just look to make sure that you have the right amount of bindings. You'll go into an event, a hard fight that will have the money pots. noted here, there is a normal option here, but it's worth 1,000 points. If you were to go into this fight and have a 3-turn penalty, you would still make more points than you would going to a normal combat. Just throwing that out there, and it has better rewards. Like, I suppose if you absolutely needed the Quillings, still that wouldn't generally be worth it. Another drafted binding, another event, Carver, Guardian. And then, of course, in Book 2, you have the opportunity of taking a hard fight straight away as Fight 1. And again, we generally do this because it's worth more points. And that's really all the things to note as far as like how the pathing works. And then I have some notes down here. I have here one of the most notable pathing pulls is the Visit Carver Run quest, because you're forced into 2 Carvers at the end of Book 1, which was added this season. And then before the villain on Book 3, you will go into a Carver. But the run quest is visit 3 Carvers. So you're going to have to take one of your events, of which you have less, in quick play dailies. And so you're going to have to choose when to do that. Taking the Carver early means that you have better rewards in Book 2 event nodes because the NPC will offer blue vestiges instead of green. Your tethered shrines have better rarity associated with them. Sea breaches are technically unaffected, and binding empowerments are technically unaffected. But binding empowerments are also more impactful early because then you get access to blue vestiges significantly faster and potentially up tiering, of course, into a purple vestige. Also note that in a deadly run, which is a run where the modifiers are trying to kill you as soon as possible, you may need to get more healing before either the hard fight with the money pot or the boss fight at the first Guardian. And so stopping by the Carver then would be a good way for you to be able to heal yourself, albeit at a cost. And then you also get to take a look at what's in the shop. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that taking the Carver early is always the best option, because it's going to contest with other nodes that generally cause more impact. Binding empowerments, if that's in your strategy, it might be offered alongside an NPC for a free vestige instead of having to look at and pay for a vestige. It might be that because of your trinket that they have assigned to you, you actually want to go to a tethered shrine instead of a Carver early. All these factors can play into here, but generally speaking, I prefer to take Carvers early, but it's also noted that if you take the Carver later, then they will have access to a green, blue, purple vestige that all of them can, of course, up tier up to a legendary. So if you're in a run where you already think that you're going to have a lot more money, it might be worth it for you to hold off the Carver until later so that you can take a look at that before the Guardian 2 fight. And then, of course, I have here to consider the average cost output for sea breaches before entering. And I have this read because I feel like sea breaches are a complete waste of your time. They don't give you a lot of growth on average. And if they do give you a lot of growth, it's generally not worth the cost because most of them require you to spend an exorbitant amount of HP, maximum HP, quillings, and that's not really a thing that you can afford to give when your HP and your quillings are kind of like your most valuable resource as far as scoring is here. Some of them also require glyphs, which means that in order to access the glyphs, you now got to go out of your way to get more glyphs, which then affects your pathing even more. So this one node now costs you 2 nodes, and that's assuming that you're actually getting something good out of it. Now, arguing binders is great. The trapped dog is very good. Some of the line in the mirror is pretty good. I'm not going to go into all of those, but considering the fact that it's a chance that they'll show up, and again, the cost is not worth the reward as far as a scoring standpoint, I would honestly not go into sea breaches. Now, I have on camera gone into sea breaches, and sometimes the value is definitely worth it because you either have way too much max HP, way too much HP, the ability to heal yourself completely, way too much quillings. And then in that case, it might be better than the alternatives because it might be, say, a Carver, a Tethered Shrine, and a Sea Breach, and you might decide, I'm willing to risk this as opposed to go to a Tethered Shrine. Now, currently, I don't think that there is a community around mapping out the dailies, figuring out which nodes are what, and where certain items are. These sort of things do crop up around games that do this, but the community in Inkbound isn't really large enough to even facilitate a daily mapping community. This may change in the future, in which case everything that we talk about here completely goes out the window. Because if you have all the information, then you're able to solve it more of like a math problem instead of like a logic problem and looking at variables and stuff like that. So do keep that in mind if by the time you're watching this there is a daily mapping community. You may just want to wait until later in the day until the daily's mapped, or you wait until somebody posts a video and then just take theirs. But I'm also sort of erring on the side that that's not going to happen, and I would also like you guys to learn how to navigate the game yourselves. Next, we're going to talk about the glyphs. Glyphs is going to be pretty short and easy. There's not really a lot to discuss here. You start a quick dive or a daily with 3 glyphs. If you kill the book 1 money pot, you're going to get 1 glyph. If you kill the book 2 money pot, you're going to get 2 glyphs. Guess what? That's 6 glyphs. You need 5 in order for top scoring. That means that you have a budget of 1 glyph. Now, according to your strategy or the individual run, you might need more than that. Well, if you take a book 1 glyph node, which you will means that you can't get another hard book node because there's not a normal book node. There's only like hard fight book glyph nodes. It's generally better in my opinion because it going to a hard book node is only going to give you 1 extra glyph. It's competing with the other hard nodes in book 2, which give you much better rewards. But if I'm in a situation where I need to take a glyph node, I generally want to take it in book 1. Of course, bunches of run modifiers, run quests can affect that. And then, of course, over here I have all the expenditures. Normally, rerolling augments and drafted bindings is going to cost you 1 glyph. So if your strategy is at the Sea of Ink, you want to make sure that you have a very specific augment for your class's bindings. Using an augment there is still within your budget because if you reroll augments, you are guaranteed to not get the same augments again. So if you don't see, say, Shield Aura, you can reroll it, guarantee that you're going to get Shield Aura. Drafted bindings, I would say that generally speaking, you don't need to reroll drafted bindings, but if you end up in the situation where you need to, notably, if whatever you're offered at the first drafted binding is not going to help you clear a hard fight and kill the money pot, you should probably spend 1 there. And then that might force you into a book 1 glyph node. But if that's the case, then that's what has to happen. Augment altars for purple augments and binding ascensions each cost 2, and each time that you reroll them, they get more expensive. But you should only ever have to reroll an augment altar purple aug once again because it's going to almost guarantee that you can get exactly what you're looking for due to the amount of augs that we get in quick dives and the cost of binding empowerments. You can't guarantee certain purple augs on your bindings because we just don't have as much augments to fill up the ones that we don't want to see purple augs on. But if you get towards the end of the run and you might have to reroll an augment altar in order to guarantee that you get the fully augment to bindings run quest, you might want to path towards a book 2 glyph node. Then of course we also have binding ascensions, of which you get 3. Note that despite the fact that some ascensions are worse, it is usually better to just skip the altar than to reroll it. Because again, if we want to reroll it, that's either going to cost us a score hit, or we will have already had to have pathed into a glyph node in order to get extra glyphs, which meant that we lost rewards, especially considering that you're not guaranteed to get the ascension that you want anyways. But you may want to do that anyways, and so then you're going to path through glyph nodes to get there. There are also tons of trinkets that do give you extra glyphs, or there's a sea breach that can give you +2 glyphs, so you might have the extra glyphs available for this, in which case, at that point, by all means. Alright, so moving on to Quillings. Quillings is going to be a little bit more complicated, and this might look familiar because it's almost exactly the same spreadsheet that we did a couple sit-down Saturdays ago that was for how we budget our run, and specifically how we budget our run in order to fit in binding empowerments. Now, while we start with more quick dive Quillings, it is also important to note that we have a lot less opportunity to gain Quillings because we don't have book mods. So, just going through here, we start with 200, and at a minimum, the book 1 Quilling cage is going to give us 80 Quillings, or a maximum of 100. We'll get over to that later. For doing all the possible damage and killing a money pot, we are going to make 168. Book 1 Guardian is going to give us at least 40 Quillings, and so in Book 1 we're going to have somewhere around 488 minimum income. In Book 2, the only income we really have is a money pot, so we kill that for 256 at a minimum. Then we kill a Guardian for 40, so then we make 296 Quillings in Book 2, and so our total run total is going to come down to 784. Now we need 750 in order to get the top score of Quillings. So, theoretically speaking, we can't spend any Quillings, right? Well, again, this is the minimum. If we take all of these Quilling rolls and push them towards the maximum, the difference is somewhere around 150 Quillings. But if we put ourselves halfway between there, we're going to end up on average somewhere around 857 Quillings, which when we subtract it gives us a budget of about 107 Quillings. Now, we've completely ignored the fact that destructibles exist. And so destructibles will give you 1 to 3 rolls of 4 to 5. So you're going to get at least 4 out of every destructible, and at most 15. So we decided to average that out at around 9 here, and you're going to see at least 6 destructibles every run, which brings you up to another 50, so you have about 150 on average, which is why in the middle of daily runs, I will generally say I have 150 Quillings to spend. Now, again, certain modifiers can increase that. You could find a Quilling Vestige early, which will then increase that, or sometimes I'm willing to risk and say I'm going to make 250 extra Quillings this run and just sort of go by chance and then let RNG decide if I get top score or not. And that's generally going to be when I want to go straight to a binding empowerment. Now, on the note of destructibles, some nodes do not have destructibles. Most notably, whenever you visit the Carver, there will be no destructibles. And most NPC and Sea Breach nodes do not have destructibles either, which is another reason why we generally will want to try to avoid those. Of course, NPCs are okay because they also give you a vestige. They're like the middle ground between terrible Quilling income and actually gaining growth. Most notably, Garden's Edge the book has a lot of destructibles in it. Maybe not on every single tile, but the Garden's Edge NPC, the Gardener, has a guaranteed 4 destructibles every single time you visit, and there's one Sea Breach node that has 4 destructibles in it as well, like a single chunk out of, I believe, there's 3 variants. So I still wouldn't risk it, but if you have to, you might be surprised with another 30 to 60 Quillings. But most notably, visiting the Gardener is very good as far as boosting your economy. Then, of course, over here I have all the expenditures. Whether or not you believe in vault rerolling or buying shop vestiges or rerolling the shop even is completely up to you. It's generally regarded that rerolling your vaults is better than spending money at the shop, but you know what you're getting at the shop, so it might be worth it. The general idea being that if you are going to reroll your Epic Vault, which is the vault that you get at the Chapter 3 Elites before the final boss, it is going to cost you 75 Quillinks to do that, and you are rerolling Epic Vestiges that might up tier into a Legendary, and you can do that twice for the cost that it will take for you to buy a single rare at the shop. You're getting, generally speaking, a better vestige, might even be a legendary, and that's why a lot of people would prefer to reroll vaults as opposed to spend money at the shop. Also note that as far as using the shop heal, generally speaking, you don't want to heal at the shop because it's using half of your disposable income. However, if you have the Death Scythe mod, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's negative 35 HP, plus you get Death Scythe, which increases your max HP. At that point, getting the shop is very important because of the fact that you're going to have a lot of max health, but you're not going to have a lot of health. And unless you roll into a healing vestige or an augment, you're not going to fill that. So you might have to path to a shop in order to heal. Now, pathing to a shop might be the wrong term because you're going to be forced into 2 shops. That should be more than enough. Also note that if your plan is to go to a shop to heal, if the healing drought mod is in effect, that reduces the healing down to 3 and is generally speaking not very good. Finally, we're just going to talk about health on the topic of health. And this one's going to be pretty quick and easy. You have to have, air quotes, full health at the end of the run in order to get max score. And HP is actually the largest distribution of scoring that you can get in all of your resources. So taking just 1 damage can potentially cost you 500 points. Now, if you have more max HP, either through you get lucky and a shrine shows up that gives you max HP, you've got vestiges that give you max HP, that of course gives you more room to wiggle and you can now take damage and still stay above 50, which is a very good place to be in because versus some bosses and versus some run mods, it's going to be very difficult for you to not take damage unless you get a very insanely busted build that just, absolutely decimates the boss. Also take a note that vestiges that gain HP, most notably the Death Scythe that we mentioned earlier, do not heal you. They just increase your maximum HP. This can be good and bad. Most usually it's okay, but in the Death Scythe example, it's bad. So, if that's the case, you're probably going to have to heal to fill up that max HP. Note that you are always forced through 3 healing wells, which is 30 HP, and you are also forced by 2 75 quilling healing wells that also heal an additional 10 HP each for 20 HP. So you get 50 HP worth of healing available to you at all time. Of course, this can be reduced significantly if the healing drought mod is in effect. Now, if the healing drought mod is in effect, or you don't want to spend money for more healing, always note that you can pass for the middle bottom option at every stat shrine to heal yourself for 5 in book 1 and 7 in book 2 and onward. This is actually the most efficient way for you to heal yourself, but of course means not taking stats. But if you're in a hyper-powered daily, this might be how you're going to go about that. Or if you're in an especially deadly daily, like there's one that I don't know has been out yet called Spicy Foes, which is every time that you hit an enemy, you take 1 damage. Might need to sacrifice your stats at that point. Now, the cost of all of these options makes Vestige healing and Augment healing very valuable. Note that I said Vestige and Augment, not Binding. While obviously Restoration is very good at healing you, since we're on a time limit, we would really prefer to not use 1 will in order to heal ourselves. And the amount of times that we can use Restoration is also significantly less because of the time restriction and the amount of fights that we have. So we're looking for stuff like Sap, We're looking for stuff like maybe even Cleave's Heal on Hit, and any vestige that heals us either during the fight preferably, or after the fight is good too. And then of course I have a final note here to always be wary of vestiges that cost max HP, most notably Token of Regret. Token of Regret is absolutely amazing in Book 1 because one extra will that early is significant. However, it reduces your max HP by 15. What I generally do is I use it to get past Book 1, maybe use it in Book 2 as well, but as soon as I get next to a healing well, I will throw it off, heal myself to recover that HP back. Just what I do personally. Anyways, hopefully all of that was understandable. If I left you guys with more questions, you have any comments on stuff that I may have left out, you have anything else you want to add to the conversation, feel free to leave that down in the comments below, as well as any other feedback you might have, such as questions, comments, concerns, misplay alerts. And until next time, I will catch you guys around.